Welcome, everyone, to the Bluefield Arts Festival. This is the Curators webinar this evening, and you're in for a real treat. We have an incredible panel that will be speaking this evening. I'm Lisa D'Amico. I'm one of the festival coordinators, and I welcome everybody. And a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. I would love it if at some point during the week, everybody could check out the festival's website. We have 5 galleries of incredibly talented artists. And while we are running the webinar, I will put the link in the chat for everyone. And speaking of the chat, if you have an artist link to a website or to your social media, please put that in the chat so we can support each other and network. Also, if you have questions during the webinar, please place your question in the chat and I will relay it to the curators and to our host, John Patrick Schutz. So I would like to introduce tonight's host, John Patrick Schutz. He is an accomplished performer, singer, writer. He is also the historian for the town of Nyack. He has been the host of this webinar, which is our most popular webinar. The festival has been running for 7 years. This webinar has been running for 6 years, and John has been the host every single year. So it is a thrill and an honor to have him back hosting this evening. We're really fortunate to have him. So John, take it away.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And thank you for that lovely introduction. It's always a pleasure to do this. I truly and honestly enjoy doing this and look forward to it every year because I get to meet all of these incredible curators that have backgrounds that are spread across all different mediums. And you've really pulled that off this year because you have people from the performing arts as well as people from the visual arts as well as historians. It's a really nice group of people, and I look forward to us having some very interesting conversation. So I'm going to start off, and just so everybody knows, I'm going to introduce each of the 5 curators in order. And then after I've spoken individually to each of the 5, we're going to open it up as a roundtable. If you have a very, very specific question regarding something that one of the curators and I are discussing during their one-on-ones, please type that in so that Lisa can bring it up to me and let me know that we can get it. Otherwise, if it's a more general question, please wait until we go to the roundtable form a little bit later on. So the first one of our curators that I'm going to bring up is Monique Ford. Monique is associated with Katonah Arts and the Katonah Museum just across the river in Westchester. And she's got a fascinating background. Monique, are you there?
Yes. Hi.
Hello. So you weren't born in Westchester, but you did grow up there, correct? And
Yeah.
you sort of returned as you got older, sort of like I did I grew up in Nyack and moved to Manhattan and then came back after my performing career sort of, ran its course. But you've got some really, really fascinating background here. You're not only a visual artist, you also teach. You have classes, drop-in drawing and that sort of thing, but you also work with screen acting and producing. Am I correct on that?
Yes, I managed a studio for 6 years. That was part of NYU's drama department.
Okay, very, very cool. And I see here that you also got a Best in Show for Artists of the Northeast. That's awfully nice.
Yeah, that was right after graduate school. That was like in 2006, which I was, pretty young for. I was in my early 20s. So.
And that was one of your visual works, I assume?
Yeah. That was a part of my thesis. I went to Pratt Institute and I have my master's in painting from Pratt. And one of the pieces in my thesis was selected for that Best in Show, which was very exciting.
Very cool. Now, you say in your artist statements that collaboration and community are extremely important to you. Talk to me about that for a minute.
Sure. So collaboration, that really pulled me into my, development as a curator. So being able to direct and manage and bring from the ground up, a new show to life and be able to pull together artists is essentially what you would sort of do in like the performing arts field where you're kind of pulling all the pieces together. And so I think that's what kind of pulled me into curating beyond being a visual artist, beyond being introverted and being in my studio and working, solitary, in a solitary space, right? Collaborating and community is really, it really makes sense for the type of personality I have. And that's why I'm so interconnected into performance art. And so that kind of crosses over into that collaboration of a community and piecing together artists to be able to, create a fabric of an exhibition. So, yeah.
I am astonished to hear you say that you're an introvert and yet you do screen acting and production workshops. That to me says someone trying to expand their horizons, and I guess, yes, really does relate to collaboration and community. You're reaching out, even though your own personal tendencies are to remain closed in and stay in your safe place and create your art alone. It's awfully nice to see someone admit that there's that introverted thing, and yet you're coming out and pulling others in with you. That sounds very worthwhile. And it also sounds like in your role over at Katonah that you have programs. I believe one of them is called drop-in drawing, that literally allows people to ad hoc jump in and say, oh, tonight I'm going to go to the drawing class, and don't have to necessarily try out for it or anything like that. That you allow that is very open and community oriented.
Yes, it's part of my mantra around teaching and education and inclusivity of like being in a space where people don't feel like they need to have, I don't want anyone to feel intimidated. I want people to feel like fluid and open to be able to try something new. They might love it, right? They don't need to have any, they don't need to have a master's degree in drawing or whatever have you, right? To be able to drop in and explore and experience art. I love working in a museum space, and I love that dialogue that people have, and as an educational standpoint, you have with the artwork in front of you. It's so, it's so visceral and it's so connected and so easy to sort of pull people in all different avenues. So teaching in a museum space like the Katonah Museum of Art is one of my, favorite spaces to be able to work and to work with artists. And yeah.
That's awesome. I totally understand that. I did work in a museum for a while, and there is something about being in that type of space that really opens you up to all of the possibilities that are out there. I think that's great. Talk to me about Look Me in My Eyes.
Look Me in the Eyes is a series that I did that resurrected my figurative work. I worked figuratively over 20 years ago, and that was my, very intuitive work that just was completely connected to my, narrative storytelling, painting, 20 years ago. And I drifted away from that in graduate school, and then I worked abstractly for a very long time. And there was just a certain part of my life where the pieces just came back together and very naturally gravitated back to the figure. And so the body of work that I have from Look Me in the Eyes really articulates that. And it's this demand for a higher level of intimacy. It's a demand for connection. And it's this slight, positive, but confrontation between the viewer and the subject. And so, a lot of the images are direct, you're really looking at the model, you're looking at that person right in the eyes. And that also came out of a COVID time where we had so little contact, where essentially our contact was like this, right? Like I would set up meetings with friends to have Zoom meetings and stuff. And so that the craving for that physical connection and that intimacy that you have in person, right? really helps solidify that body of work as well. So
Awesome. Now, I'm going to point out that most of the figures in this figurative work are female, correct?
yes, yes.
And I got an enormous charge out of looking at some of the images from that show of indeed how much there is a connection of look in the eyes. And I am not going to apologize for being female. I'm not going to apologize for being totally feminine.
Hmm.
But I do have to ask a little bit of a weird question. How come in figurative work, if
Hmm.
it's the female form, that's art? If it's the male form, that's pornography. And yet, does that mean we have objectified women even that much further? That, oh, it's okay to look at her as just an object. She's just art. And men can't handle that being done, being treated the same way? Is that what that comes out of? Or I know this is kind of off the wall, but it struck me a little bit as I was looking at that, going, wait a minute. If a man was in that same position here doing this or that, most people would go, oh, that's inappropriate. And yet we're okay with it being a woman doing that. Anything from the female side that would let me know how I should be looking at that? Are we too objectifying of women, or are we too scared of men, or are we just
Mm.
that homophobic or something in the country that that's the reason why?
Yeah, I mean that's like a dissertation in itself, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Um,
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean it's the male gaze, it's the female gaze, right? It's I deeply am rooted in cinematography and film growing up around a lot of filmmakers. So that manipulation of that composition is really intense and very amplified and psychologically draws you in. So I think about it more like that. I think about it more in terms of psychology. Um, but yeah, I don't paint nude women.
True. But there
Um,
was a
but
certain,
but they are very, yeah, they're not, they're very feminine and they're very, they can be kind of seductive and intense and visceral, right? And very, sensual, right?
mhm.
But,
But your forms, the women in them are claiming, are
yeah,
owning that sort of,
right, right.
but you put a man in the same sort of situation where
Yeah.
he's kind of smoldering and everything, and people take that
Hmm.
as inappropriate. And it's kind of
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that we are treating women better, but
Hmm.
in my head, I'm also like, yeah, but for years we objectified women, and
Right.
I figured
Right.
I would ask.
Yeah, I mean the females are really, in terms of the work that I'm doing now, they're really, they're representations, they're like icons. They're like, these sort of like kind of like these more like these spiritual beings in the images
Mhm.
that I'm making now. They're more like iconic, right? But in that series, they have transitioned that sort of out of that kind of format. But no, it's interesting. And I do, and I studied a lot of figure drawing in undergrad and grad, and I painted a lot of men and drew a lot of men and, loved drawing their muscular, curvatures and contours and such. But they're all the figures that I'm painting are essentially narrative paintings of me, they're of every woman, right? They're not,
Right. They
there's
are both self and paradigm, and
right,
okay.
right, right. And yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we'll see like how long I could probably paint them the rest of my life, but we'll see if there's any,
Mhm.
other forms that come into the images in male or whatever have you, right? So,
Cool.
yeah.
Okay. No, I just thought it would be interesting to
Yeah.
ask your perspective
Hmm.
what that was about. So here we
Hmm.
go. I'm going to ask you to hold on. I'm going to move to the next artist, but remember, please hang on because we're going to have a roundtable, and I'd love to talk to everybody. So I'm saying this right now for all the artists as well as for yourself
John,
about what's going on. Yes, Lisa.
just quickly, I just want to direct the audience, if when they have a moment to look in the chat, there's an interesting story written by a photographer about censorship and the male nude. So I think people would find that interesting.
Hmm.
Very
Thanks,
cool.
Lisa.
Thank you very much, Monique. Hold
Thank
on.
you.
We'll be chatting with you again in a minute, but
Okay.
I need to move on to Heather at this point.
Hi.
Hi, Heather. So this is Heather Garside, everybody, who works with the Paterson Museum. And Heather has a very historical background going on. And I was reading up on some of the talks that you give. Now, the nice thing about Heather is she takes her art to you. Groups of either students or older folks, seniors, can actually have Heather come to them in order to give PowerPoint presentations on people who are important to the Paterson area, correct?
Yes, yeah.
Um,
By default, by default, I'm sort of the female expert. So I ended up doing a lot of the talks about the important women because I just noticed that my colleagues I was working for always kind of were like into the industrialists, and
ah,
so I didn't really think of myself as this sort of like super feminist, but I'm the one sitting there going, we need some more ladies in here.
I'm the one who's writing a book on all of the women in the Nyack area over the centuries that have done something first as a female, and I'm a guy. And people are like, why are you doing that? I'm like, because they're fascinating. Why
Yeah.
shouldn't I do that? Anyway, I like some of the folks that you pulled out. Now, you've got the wife of one of the vice presidents, um, who then, after his death, became a very important person in Paterson history, correct?
Yeah, so Jenny Tuttle Hobart is arguably more important than her husband. Garrett Hobart was the first vice president of William McKinley, and
McKinley.
arguably is only important because he died, so that meant Teddy Roosevelt could be
Well,
vice president, which meant he could
exactly.
become president. And so, but his wife became this huge, I mean, they were very philanthropic as a couple, but after he died, she like took it to a whole new level, and really was incredibly philanthropic in the Paterson area, doing all kinds of stuff, in many ways, way before her time. She's very instrumental in forming the first daycare for working mothers in Paterson. And she serves as the president of that organization pretty much until she's like in her 70s. And she also was very active with things like the Red Cross. She did a lot for the World War One sort of refugees. Paterson's also got a very long history of disasters, particularly floods. And she was sort of always there with her checkbook paying for, mattresses for people who were stuck sleeping in the armory for, a couple weeks because their houses were flooded and stuff like that. She was really very important here.
And you've got obviously a lot of what you do when you're curating these history talks is gleaning from all of the available materials to you about these famous Patersonians. I think that's the right demonic.
Yes, Patersonians.
And you've got a waterfall there that's a big problem, right? In the middle of the city.
Well, big problem, national park. No,
Yeah, that too.
no.
But
The Paterson Great Falls. Yeah, it's beautiful.
I noticed that a lot of your history talks also concern social justice, anti-discrimination, and so on. You've got the Minerva Miller story, who was one of the first people of color to actually sue and win. Of course, that didn't necessarily mean anything, but she did win.
Yeah.
You've also got the story of the first American League baseball player of color, which as an American League fan made me very happy that someone remembered there was somebody else besides Jackie Robinson, not to take anything away from him, but there are two leagues. Somebody
Yes.
had to become first in that. So that's
Larry
fascinating
Doby.
too. And being a big baseball fan, that was kind of something that I found very attractive. But tell us about linking in these great stories of famous Patersonians and folks from that area and social justice.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that there's one of the things that why these people, I think they're both gripping to me, but also sort of appealing, is because I think that their stories are still appealing to particularly our local demographic, but even wider field. Lots of people do know Larry Doby, but don't know the details, and so I think that as I dig into these presentations and learn about them, there are so many things that still resonate today. And Minerva Miller, like I find her absolutely like fascinating. Since researching her, she's like my new, like, people say, who would you want to meet if you could meet anyone who'd passed away? Like, I think a famous person, I think I would pick her. Like, I have to know. Like, she was just seems like such an amazingly gutsy woman, and I'm really
Mhm.
curious if she was really as much of a fireball as she seems like she was.
She sounds like
Reading
she was
about her.
Paterson's Rosa Parks long before
Oh,
Rosa was in became
totally.
famous herself.
And it's absolutely kind of insane when you put it in context and think about, she was doing, her case was in 1911,
11.
1912. And it's like when you think of a woman saying some of the thing, and she's only quoted a couple of times in the paper, but some of the things she says, you're kind of like, yeah, go for it, sister. Like, like she's just really, she's just kind of like letting them have it. And it's also really interesting because one of the things that I found frustrating researching her was that so much of her story comes back to the male lawyers, the judge, and it's so very little of it was about her. And she's actually
Uh-huh.
still quite a mysterious person to sort of try and find. And I only, thank God for newspapers.com. I don't know what we did before keyword searching, stuff like that. And I still feel like there's a lot left to find about her. But my presentation about her kind of ended up being, it wasn't intentionally this way, but I sort of presented it as my research journey of how do you find this woman through learning about the men in her life and then sort of dissecting that to tell us what it tells us about her. Uh, and that
That's
was kind of,
tragic right there that you have to go through the men of her life. Tell us a little bit about, before we finish and go to the next artist, tell us a little bit about the challenges that come for you in curating a story like this, where you do your research. You've already told us about one, newspapers.com. As Nyack historian, I use them too.
yeah.
So, but give us a little bit more on how you do your research and how you do your curating of these types of talks.
Well, so when I do my research, I focus a lot on, I try and use as much of what we have in our collection as possible to sort of highlight the museum as much as I can, and then go to sources like newspapers.com. I often start with things like Google. Minerva Miller, there's an encyclopedia of the history of New Jersey, and I kind of started there and actually was really annoyed because they didn't even have her death date. So I need to send them a message because I've got it now.
Yeah.
But so I just sort of, with Minerva Miller, there was a lot of going back and forth between even just Google searches and things like that. I found some really odd sources on Google books that I never would have found just looking for her specifically. And I go to Family Search and did some of the sort of census
Okay.
records and that kind of stuff as well. But beyond my talks, when we try to sort of turn these things into physical exhibits in the museum, the big struggle is that a lot of this stuff is flat. And I
No
think people
visuals.
still have this need to come and see something three-dimensional in a museum. And,
Okay.
for some reason we have this, like, we need to see George Washington's shoe or it wasn't worth coming. So I struggle in some cases with some of the stories I tell because they're such compelling stories, but then I haven't got anything to represent these people. And Minerva Miller, it's actually incredibly exciting. It doesn't really connect with her, but we did find on eBay a ticket from the theater that she was suing. And obviously, we don't know if it's her ticket and it's not dated, and it doesn't actually look that exciting if you don't know her story. But it is
Right.
from the movie theater, and they closed shortly after she sued them. So, that's the kind of the closest tangible that we have at the museum right now for her. And we don't even have a photo of her. So that I think is one of my
No photo at
struggles.
all.
No.
Wow. Oh, wow. You would think with the historic aspect of her case, even in 1911, that they would have at least taken a picture of this upstart
Yeah.
who didn't want to pay more because she was a person of color, as opposed to white people paying less.
Right.
Uh, it just awesome. That's, first of all, it's wild that that was something that we ever had to deal with, and probably still do to this day. I'm going to switch over to Goran at this point, if that is all right to you. But I want to
Of
point
course.
out you've got a couple of other talks that can be moved. You've got one on pearls,
Mhm.
because they actually had pearls coming out of the mussels, I believe, correct? In
Yes, yes, freshwater mussels.
And then you've got uh, the intro to museums. What a brilliant idea on getting people to understand how to enjoy museums and maybe not have to have one of George Washington's shoes, and getting that a museum is an experience and that it is a storehouse of knowledge and not just physical items, but a place where our whole history can be remembered. Thank you very much. As a fellow historian, I don't want to nerd out on everybody right now. So thank you for that. Hang on, because we'll add you in when you do the group chat. And let's go over to Goran right now. Goran Igev, everybody, has the IO Arts Center. And that's down at Wave Hill in Palisades, New York, on Route 9W, in a beautiful, beautiful restored building that is so conducive to what he's trying to do there. Are you with me, Goran?
Yes, hi. Thank you, John.
How are you? Are you in the building right now, or are you at home?
At home.
Okay. I love hearing that you are not only helping the arts to flourish by encouraging performance at your space, by encouraging artists that will display at there, but also that you're in love with the space itself, that you're someone who does restoration on architectural items, on buildings. How did you get into doing that, especially having come here from North Macedonia? What makes our historical buildings so fascinating to you, or any historical buildings fascinating to you?
First of all, hi. Thank you, Lisa, to invite me to be among these beautiful historians. Such a pleasure to be around here with you guys. I believe that profession chose me. Maybe the building chose me to be there. And knowing that where I'm coming from, history is taken a little bit for granted because it's given on every foot. And
you have a lot more history than we have.
But what is beautiful here that we preserve history much better than those folks in Europe. So that's how I fell into the industry, and preserving the history, it's very important, and implementing the passion in everything that is there for us, it's something that we should take advantage of. So if we have a building like that, we should preserve them.
Excellent. I read that you actually have done work with and for the Smithsonian. Was this also on architectural items, or?
Yes, and as well as parks and recreations, where our other I was almost supposed to work on the Paterson Museum, but I have not. But that's a beautiful building. To the other colleague there, greetings to Paterson. That's a beautiful town where my parents live, and I worked with Smithsonian for the United States Post Offices.
Oh. Have you been in Nyack's post office? Have you seen the WPA art that is around the ceiling that's in there?
Yes.
We almost lost that.
I know. Well, I wrote many times to, I don't know where those emails end up usually, but mainly those buildings are built to last forever. But if the roofs are not good, the leaks are damaging everything. So
it is a shame that our generation here doesn't know how to maintain anything. We seem to think that things have come into existence and they'll always be that way, and not that we have to take care of their roofs leaking, not that we have to take care that the basement doesn't flood, not that we have to take care of the fact that it might need to be repainted every 20 years or so. The artwork that's in the Nyack post office, for instance, because I know it personally, is in danger of having and I believe parts of it have already had water come behind the murals, and there's bubbling and stuff that's going on. It would be a great shame if that was lost. In terms of your IO center, what brought you to this area, and did the building kind of speak to you and say, this should be here, this should have music, this should have art? What encouraged you to take that wonderful place and make it into a center for the arts?
Again, maybe it's probably part of the life that that building was always on the crossroads, me being between Connecticut and New Jersey and New York, and I passed by many times, and like I said, I work for all these institutions that I travel a lot, so that building was available at the right time, and it's just magical. So something told me that I should be there, and then everything unveils. Then the community that it's you guys there, like it's all these little towns around Palisades are just so welcoming to us, and that brings more passion to invest more into the restoration of the building. And I'm a big fan of Edward Hopper, so being nearby in such a small historical bubble, it's just an honor.
It is amazing how many artists, architects, performers have been concentrated historically in this very small area of, say, Palisades through Piermont, Nyack up to New City and the whole South Mountain Road thing up there. There really has been an incredible number of them. And it's so good to see someone like yourself encouraging that legacy to go on, to encourage the artists from around here and their work. It's just brilliant. I'm very pleased that you're doing that. As someone who's from here and has lived here my whole life, with the exception of my 20 years in Manhattan, it's very important that we keep this very special area accessible to the arts and as welcoming to the arts as it has been historically. We thank you for coming in and taking that wonderful space and giving it what's probably its highest and best use. To think of that either becoming a single family home or just languishing as a place to do auctions, no. People need to be in there and breathe in there and see in there. The light is magnificent going into that place. When you're up in the big gallery area, I was astonished the first time I was in there, and I was in there when it was empty. And I just thought to myself, this is magnificent. Someone should do something with this that's not, or, you know, it could have become a restaurant. Kind of an okay use, but not the best. I truly think that you've found a place that you can express your own artistic ideals, let others do that, and really encourage preservation of that building. Again, I'm very, very impressed. And we thank you for coming to the area, because everything I've heard so far has been nothing but good stuff about this guy's amazing. What he's doing there is really cool. So good luck with your Valentine's Day performance that's going to be there. I hear there's a nice musician coming in for Valentine's Day. Is that correct?
Thank you. And your prayers, and many prayers came through. And on Valentine weekend will be a group show as well for all the local artists that wanted to enter the open call. And the outreach, it's great, and I think we're gonna have a lot, like 20 to 30 local artists from the local area that will have a group show, and the 3 winners will have 3 floors for a solo exhibition as a prize. And on the 14th, we're going to have Andrew Ace, the piano man. So everybody's welcome. It's going to be beautiful 3 days of art and love. And the motto is nobody's alone at IO Art Center. So whoever is single or couples, please join us for the weekend. It's going to be great. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Goran. Perfect. Hang on for the group chat, and I'm going to move on now. And we're going to go with Sheryl. Sheryl Intrator. Are you there, Sheryl?
I'm here. Could you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, good.
So everything is just fine. Now, you've been an active artist for like 30 years. Am I correct?
Yes.
And you generally do visual work?
Yes.
Your own art is generally visual work.
Right.
What I found interesting looking you up is how much has to do with social issues and causes. These are obviously important to you, and your religious heritage is also important to you, both as an artist and as a curator. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, as an artist, when I first started out, want to find out where you could exhibit your work. And I joined several different organizations. One of them was called Salute to Women in the Arts in New Jersey. And it was started in the 1970s by a group of women who couldn't exhibit their work. There was no place to do it. And they let other artists in. I was lucky that I joined it. And when I did, I realized that they're very encouraging to artists, and any artist, even if you're emerging, you're able to join and exhibit. I became active and started helping them find venues. I think I became some kind of vice president for them for a couple of years. And then I started to join other organizations that had to do with sometimes political organizations or religious organizations, and I brought my art to it. And as things happened in the political scene, sometimes I was able to do shows or create my own artwork and answer to them, to different issues that were happening. And I was lucky to be introduced to the Belskie Museum. And what I mean by that is to say that I was involved with an organization, and we decided to see if we could do an exhibition there. And I've curated 11 exhibitions there so far. We have another one coming up in May. But yes, the religious component of mine is very important. But when I have to work with constraints of venues of where I could show my artwork, I have to abide by the rules of the venue. For instance, no nudes allowed in the Belskie.
Okay.
And I did a series of Adam and Eve. You were talking about the male nude.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of male nudes.
I was going to ask about the Greek ones, but okay, keep going.
So I'd love to show them there, but when I had them showing actually in a couple of different places and with a gallery, they put one of the artworks in the front of the in window, and people were appalled. And then they took it out, and people came in, and men more than women were giggling. They couldn't contain themselves. They were embarrassed, and because I had the male nudes.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's just with the male nudes. I just wanted to bring that up because I know you were talking about the male nudes earlier.
No, it's okay. I had a situation at Fordham University. I was a student there from 80 to 84. And as part of the Arts Council, we had environmental art put out all over the Rose Hill campus, which mostly, and these were big, big pieces of art that were outside and so on and so forth. But the one male nude that was done as a faun from Greek mythology and made completely out of sticks and found wood was torched and burned. It's very, very weird reaction that American society seems to have to any kind of art that includes the male nude. So I get where you're coming from.
Well,
Have you,
in the 1980s, there was, I think it was the Gorilla Women were also like very interested in the male nudes and how come there's so many female nudes and there's no male nudes. And I got into that, when, as you're saying, political things, I guess I was very attuned to the art world and what was going on in the art world. And I mean, I have so many ideas that I want to do, but part of the idea is how do I get my artwork to show? And that was how I became a curator.
excellent. Art with a purpose, I believe, is one of your mantras.
Yes, art with a purpose. So that's the way that I actually like to create all of my art exhibitions that I'm inviting other artists to come to. I usually have a paragraph about something that I hope will resonate with artists, and they have to, I don't choose artwork from random. They have to work within the scope of my theme.
Right.
That's the way I like to work. So I choose a theme, then the artists have to not only create the artwork or look at and see what they have that relates to it, but they also have to write a paragraph or a few lines to show why their artwork fits into my theme. And then I feel like I have a cohesive exhibition that when people come, even though some of it may be abstract, some may be figurative, some may be just decorative, the artists have thought about how it has to connect. And that's the beauty of the art also, in my opinion, from the artists that they actually think, does my artwork fit into the theme of the show? And that's been very important to me. And as far as religion is concerned or tradition is concerned, a lot of times I like to bring that in. And especially now with the anti-Semitism that's
I was
going,
about to ask you about that, and I'm glad you brought it up. Go ahead.
a few years ago, I created myself an art piece based on Marc Chagall. And one of his, the way that he works in a circle. And it was before COVID. And it was a lot of anti-Semitic things were happening in New York and around the world. And I created a piece like that. And it's very hard for people to look at. But somebody like Marc Chagall did that all the time, and as far as being an art historian, I also bring people as a private docent to the Met, to the Jewish Museum, to Neuer Gallery, and many other places. And I go to places and I give lectures. And one of the things that when I started to give the lectures, and I was giving the lectures about the Impressionists, and everybody here who is an historian here understands that they couldn't get their artwork shown
No.
in the French art salon, and then they got together, a few of them. They said, let's make our own exhibition, and they got they got called labeled Impressionism because it wasn't a good thing, because they did it of Monet's artwork, sunrise impression, and they said that was like sloppy, horrible, whatever it was. They got labeled Impressionism. And then like Gustav Klimt did the same thing. He couldn't get his artwork shown, and he hated that he was labeled as a pornographic artist, and he didn't like censorship. And he made his own group in the Succession movement. And so I saw a lot of these artists helping themselves and other artists. And that's what I wanted to do. So whatever theme it is that I'm doing, I usually have it resonate somehow with a current event, with something that's happening, so that people could relate to it. And it's wonderful to get, in my opinion, the artist thinking, the artists themselves thinking. And then when you come to the art show, you're looking at it, and some of it you may not understand, but the artist understands. And that's the beauty of the art show.
Excellent. We can indeed make a statement with our showings of art, and not just be there for beauty or anything that's aesthetic. There is also work to be done with art that can really, really affect people and make them think. which is apparently not such a good thing to try and do anymore. We're going to
Good.
get a little bit more of that when we do the roundtable. Sheryl, I thank you very much. I have to move on to Kristine. It has been a total pleasure. Hang around because we're going to talk about what's happening in the world right now and how it's hitting art hard. Thank you very much. And let's move along to Kristine Kumpf from Nyack Library. She is the program specialist. Kristine, hello.
Hi, JP.
I'm glad to have you here as Nyack's historian. It's awfully nice to finish off with someone who's also from Nyack. I really like a lot of what I've seen with what you do there. And when you asked if we could discuss the Carnegie concert series, I was all for that because performing arts, I was a performing artist for a long, long time. Yes, we're artists too. And so to have you really facilitating that at our beautiful library, that's the room where it's done. If any of you have never been to the Carnegie series, please go. You've got people like Peter Danish from Nyack and Rita Harvey from Nyack doing some of their work there, and so many others. Talk to us about that space and how you choose what's going to be in there.
So as we plan for the Carnegie Concert Series, and this was something I took over about 3 years ago with my supervisor at the time, who's now the director, Tracy Dunstan. It was really important for us to bring in new artists and be able to curate it in a way where we have, you know, a great eclectic arrangement of genres. We had noticed that, unfortunately, like in previous years, things had become too repetitive, and we really wanted to, you know, hit all of the different styles, you know, whether it be, you know, hard bop jazz or Afro-Cuban or classical, rock, bluegrass. We brought in a duo recently that had a violinist and a trombonist who played together, and they had a very modern style. And, you know, at first, and don't get me wrong, we have art classical and we have classical jazz, of course, but at first it was, you know, the question of, you know, things are a little bit different, maybe bringing in some younger musicians too. Uh, you know, what kind of style is this? Is it going to be too loud? And it's so amazing that the ones that get the most questions or the ones that people are like, well, what am I in for tonight? Ends up with the, you know, double standing ovation and get the people moving. I'm proud to say I'm finally getting people to stand up and feel their feet within the Carnegie Room from time to time now, because, you know, that's what music does. It moves us, you know, music is life. So, you know, this year for our series, we've had Conga Bop with Ed Fast. We've had the Jim Donica Trio, which was an amazing jazz trio. You know, these are Class A acts that are coming through Nyack Library. And next is Particle Theory, just next Friday. And they're doing an interesting mix of Middle Eastern jazz and bluegrass. So, yeah, I know. I was like, that's quite a combination.
I love it. But that is what music is about. Music is ever changing. Music is always evolving. And one of the wonderful things about the diversity of the Nyack area is, and the whole New York City area for that matter, is that you get these fusion things that you go, how can that possibly work together? And it does.
It does.
Very, very exciting stuff. And you do invite local artists as well, not just, you know, pulling from New York City, but you certainly pull from around here.
A majority, I mean, we do get some New York City artists, don't get me wrong, but a multitude of them are Nyack based who just, you know, have had a long career in Manhattan as well. And there's times, you know, I have some great experiences too, like up in the Capital region. We're having a wonderful concert. I invite you all for the 250th on Friday, July 24th. We found a great group. They're called the Love Struck Balladeers when we were at the NYLA concert, the NYLA conference for librarians. And they're a great, you know, jazz group. And we're going to have a nice Americana 250 concert in July for that. But again, sometimes I've been on vacation, you know, up in that area, or like I said, for this conference, and we find some like people who are coming down into the lower Hudson Valley to do a tour, and we bring them through, and it's wonderful. There's a lot of great music out there. One of our biggest things too is, you know, trying not to repeat people within a few years, you know, because we were, you know, and you know, I'm never going to say anything's negative ever. Like I hope it doesn't take that tone, but I would start to look at years prior, and I
And
see
the same
the
people were,
same names. Yeah,
yep.
there's
Um,
too much good stuff out there.
mhm. Yeah, variety is a wonderful thing. And yeah, I did notice that the program for a while had sort of gotten a little bit stalled, and the same acts would be back year after year. Now, some of them are my friends. So again, and I don't want to in any way insult their talent or anything, but a variety is a wonderful thing. And you have been providing that from what I've been seeing on the schedules that arrive in my mailbox. You've really branched out into a number of different areas. So I gather that part of how you get your folks is just you're keeping your eyes open, and even on your trip, the library trip. Um, you don't know my mother, do you, Irene Schutz? She was Blauvelt Library for 60 years until COVID made her retire at 92. Um, uh,
Yeah, yes.
okay, thought so. Yeah, they even named the poetry nook after her, which is kind of awesome, especially since she's still alive and see it named after her. Okay, I'm gonna pull everybody in at this point. Can I have all of the curators turn their mics on? We'll open it up for questions, but I'm going to give you all a question first. We are in very challenging times for the arts. And how is that affecting you and your work? And how are you working against it? To have funding pulled constantly and be told that if you're not part of this particular idealism, then you're not going to get any art grants or anything. How is that affecting your work? Everybody, please, Sheryl and uh, Goran and Monique and Heather, please pop in. Unmute yourselves first, and let us know how it's working with you. And Kristine, of course, you're in a library, and I know my mother is very upset about people talking about book burnings and all the rest of it. It's a tough place to be where we are right now, and I'm trying to be as impolitic as possible, but at the same time, there are definitely new challenges for the arts during this time period. No
I
thoughts?
just, I think I think the act of creating and the act of collaborating and community is so influential. It's so integral to this part of, I mean, this is essentially what we need the most. We need people to be as creative as they can possibly be and alchemize and, pull in all of the you know, frustration and grief that people are experiencing and be able to transcend it into positive energy and move through it together. I think it's a foundational component of, I think that's what artists are, on this planet for, right? In terms of just telling their stories, communicating and creating, magic out of challenging experiencing and experiences in time.
John, there's a related question in the chat to what you're
Okay.
posing right now. Ruth asked, how do the curators feel about exhibiting challenging political artwork in the institutions where each of you work?
So I'm just going to piggyback really quick on what Monique said about you mentioned community, and so the Paterson Museum, we're a city-funded museum, and we do have our changing galleries also often used as the community space where groups will come and occasionally have things like baby showers, but more often concerts. And we have an organization that we partner with that does poetry about once a month in there. And I think it's important for us as a museum to sort of be that safe place where they feel like they can present their whatever they're feeling, and that group is a particularly a lot of the open micers and have a very political tone to a lot of their poems, and they know that the museum is a safe space where that can be expressed and understood and appreciated in the context of art. And I think that's our challenge, because I feel like museums, libraries, we've suddenly become this battleground, and we're all the people that used to be quiet in the background. The happy place that people went has now become this intense place. But I think for us at the museum, I think my big goal is just to make sure that everyone knows that, regardless of what they're expressing, that we're a safe place where they can do that.
So you feel that your museum is still indeed a safe place. That is a wonderful thing to hear.
Yeah, I mean, occasionally people express opinions we may or may not all agree with, but yeah, and that's part of it too, I guess.
What I've always found amazing about art, Monique kind of brought this up, and it blends in with yours as well, is how a piece of art can be both extremely specific and universal at the same time. Mm-hmm. That to me has always been one of the great wonders of art. That specific incident I've never experienced that, but somehow it opened me up, and I can see how that is part of me, that I am part of the universe, that I am part of a bigger thing than just my own experience. It is good to know and hear that some of our institutions are still very good, safe places. That's a wonderful thing. Anything from anybody else on that?
I would agree with Heather. I'm lucky enough to work in an institution where, we have our open mics, and we have a lot of grant funded projects that come through the library. So I'll work with grantees for both art and, their music presentations, and whether it be at an open mic where people have spoken word or poetry based on what's going on in the country today, or, they're doing some type of performance, like it's really a very free and accepting space. I'd like to say that our open mics in like a year and a half grew from about 7 people coming to about 50, which is fantastic, with about 13 performers. And it really is just such a beautiful evening, because it's also very intergenerational. From 15 to 95 years old, I've been getting contributors. So to sit together in that space and have teens listening to the stories of, an 80-year-old woman and vice versa is just really powerful. So
that's absolutely awesome, because we can't ghettoize ourselves too far into, oh, this is only going to be for the teens, this is only going to be for the 20-somethings, this is only going to be for the people who believe this one thing or that one thing. We need to share our experiences with each other across the generations, across races, across political divides. We need to share. We need to be a community. That's one of the reasons why I moved back to Nyack, having grown up here. And when I left Manhattan, it was one of the only places that I felt that those kinds of ideas could always be shared, even if I didn't agree necessarily. Thank you very much for saying that. Anything else, any input from any of the other curators? And do we have any more questions, Lisa?
There's another question, and it's a very universal question for artists. And I would love for the curators who haven't really spoken that much yet to talk about this. And I get asked this a lot as a curator as well. The question is this: does a good artist have to have a recognizable, consistent style? What is a curator looking for when they review an artist's work and portfolio?
I don't curate, so somebody else has to answer this.
Sheryl, you're muted. Oh, Goran.
Yeah, Goran, go ahead.
I will connect between the previous question and this one. Statistically, 2025 was the worst in the times of the art, and when it comes to sales for the artists that we are presenting, because I am actually, I don't know about the others, I'm presenting artists that are upcoming, unknown, and median priced. And there was a lot of sale for the artists that are known in the previous year. enormous amount of money. But for us, like who are unknown, like a gallery like I just opened in the worst time, but that's a good sign. The fight is big. It's unlike others, it's solely funded, and sometimes I don't even know how I'm getting from one end to another. But then there's gonna be that one lady that'll come by and be like, "I want to buy that painting," and that's gonna push us through the month, and that gives us wings to go further and further. And choosing those artists now, to the other question, is I think when we choose the artist, we choose the person. What's their message? And I think so far I was never wrong. And when the artist has the powerful message, even that sometimes can be very edgy with the, let's say I had the Ukrainian month presentation for in October, and I was like, is that gonna be offending somebody? Maybe some people likes Ukraine, some people don't like Ukraine, but we are those curators that we can pull the line, or just be brave. Don't have limits when it comes to art. We should not limit ourselves. Otherwise, there will be no art. So that's how I can explain who I choose or who choose me.
Excellent. That's very insightful, because there are those artists out there that have a varied style, that use a good number of media, and to expect them to always be exactly the same seems in its own way to be some kind of censorship. So choosing the artist because of who they are and what their message is, I would think, more important than because all they do are romantic oil landscapes and that's all I want, that sort of thing. Thank you, Goran. That makes a lot of sense. Lisa, how are we on time?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Let's have Sheryl have the last word.
Excellent.
Yes.
I was, listening to Monique and to Goran and to everybody else, and it sort of goes back to the art with a purpose and having ideas that whether the curator is setting forth what the idea is, whether it's Ukraine or whatever it is that they're thinking of, then the artist gets the artwork, however we, put out our artist call, and it's for us to select it. And most of the time, for me, it's just like how everyone was saying, it's like you look at the artwork. It doesn't have to be that I look at a whole body of artwork. I'm not looking to do that. I'm focusing on a particular show or exhibition that I'm putting together. If I was doing a solo show for someone, yeah, then I'd have to look at all of their artwork. But otherwise, I want to help an emerging artist. I like to get a well-known artist. I get people from the East Coast that send me their artwork, and they'll drive in a piece of sculpture. They just want to be in the show, but it's the art with a purpose. It has to connect somehow, and the artists themselves have to be able to make clear what they're trying to show, and I have to be able to understand it. And then it's for everybody else to see. As the curator, I get the first say, to let you in.
Mm-hmm.
I guess so that's what I just wanted to say.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you to everybody, Monique, Heather, Goran, Sheryl, and Kristine. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for letting us be with you.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Lisa.
thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We should do this more.
Yes. We
I
should
like
do
that.
this more. And thank you, John.
Thank you,
Thank you,
John.
John.
Yes.
Thank you, John. You've been a wonderful host, John, and
Yes,
I
thank you.
recommend the audience please visit the festival website, which is bluefieldartsfestival.com. And also, you can rewatch this webinar. Just go to the events calendar page on the website, and you can watch it over and over again. And you can also watch the other webinars as well. So thank you, everyone, for attending and for supporting and celebrating the arts. We need it more than ever.